Good evening, everyone, and we are back in our study, continuing on from Isaiah. Uh, Isaiah, that's chapter 3. We left off in verse 17 the last time, and so we're continuing on from verse 18. And just a little bit of connection back so that we don't forget what happened at the previous verses. The previous verses were deliberating on some of the punishments that were delivered to the women. Now, we don't read much about women specifically in the prophet books, but in this particular case, what we see is in chapter 3 of Isaiah, they're talking to Judah, Jerusalem, and how the men had gone down, but the women became a focal point. And with the women being focal point, God spoke through the prophet Isaiah, through with quite a detailed list of how he would deal with them and how the women were living their lives being totally oblivious of God. And hence, we are duly reminded that we are looking at a period of time uh, after the fall of the northern kingdom, at the time of Hezekiah. And that's where we pick up from there. We are now in chapter 3, verse 18 onwards. So let me scroll it down. Now, in verse 18, God says, in that day. And one of the interesting thing is that when it says in that day, it has always got to do with the day of judgment. All right. In the day of judgment that is impending, and we can see God will take away the finery. The word finery would be their how should I say their beauty, their splendor. And in this chapter, you would see that women are very well adorned. And how would they describe this beauty and splendor? And so, what did the women wear? So it says here the jingling anklets, very what do you call it? Very imagery driven. The jingling anklets would tell us that these are the kind of anklets that has bangles. Okay, and they wear it on their anklets, and it gives off, I guess, a certain tinkling sound when they walk around. And so this is the description of them wearing these anklets that clank along, right? And then they have scarves. Now, in this case, these are what I guess you can call them headbands. Headbands would be if this was a woman, and then the band would likely be on the front, right? She will wear them around here. Now, if you go to Jerusalem, some of them actually do wear this as well. What else is this? This would be, there would be another ornament, and these are called crescents. Now, the crescents is kind of interesting in its description. You have, this is part of the woman, and then we have the neck. And the neck part, and you've got your clothes. And so the crescent would look something like this. It would be something that they adorn. And these would be necklaces. And the necklaces represent the crescent of a moon. So it's one piece that would be relatively solid, and then the rest would be hanging around the head, the neck, sorry. And that would be the crescent. I'm just trying to give you the picture because some of these English words don't seem to to give us the right imagery that we can think about. The next one would be pendants in verse 19. The pendants here would be very similar to, if you have an adorning and then something hangs on it. So this is a pendant. All right. And then we have bracelets. I guess bracelets is easy to understand. We saw bracelets on the ankles that they will bang. They are bangles. Bracelets on the hand or on the wrists. These are there. And then the veils. The idea of veils in this case does not imply just veils like this. Let me just draw it out. It doesn't imply veils that is covering the head. It also implies veils that seems to fly out when they walk. Okay. So when they walk fast, these veils actually, they quiver in the breeze. So when the wind blows, it is hanging behind them. That's the kind of veils. And why do they do that? It really shows that these are women who wants to really show off what they have. The next one would be headdresses. What are headdresses? Headdresses in this case refers to, well, some translations will call it turbans, right? But it would be embellishment on the head. So if you have hair, then it would be something that goes along on the head. How would we represent? So it would be ornaments on the head, right? Fancy headdresses, you can call it that. And now we have leg ornaments. So you begin to see that these leg ornaments are anklets or ankle chains. And then the next one is another form of headbands. And these would be bands. I think these would be bands more for the girdle, for the waist, right? Rather than the head. But they wear it around the body. They have perfume boxes. And so we're now talking about the upper class people. I guess they call this perfume, but it is very much they call it the nefesh houses, right? House of nefesh. And yeah, I guess perfume boxes would give us that picture. Then we have whisperings. Whisperings come from the word charms, from the word it is from the word lakash that comes from the word nachash as well. And these are, maybe you could call it amulets. And then more rings. These would be rings that signify, or you call it signets. Signets. The kings actually wear signets or rings that are fairly big, right? These are big ones, not your little bands on the finger. And then they find nose ring. Now, in this case, the nose ring would be nose ornament that goes along the nose. And so this would be nose ornaments. So it can be nose rings or nose jewels. And then what else do you have? You have festal apparel. I think that would be easy to note. These are robes. And then mantles. Mantles would be the tunics. And then you have the outer garment. That would be this outer garment. And these would be cloaks that you put on top. And then there are purses. They carry purses as well. Purses would be, well, in those days, those are little bags. I think that would be an easier way to describe them. Little bags. So purses are actually little bags that's cut out hollow that you can keep pins or things of that nature. And then they have mirrors. In the old form, they are called tablets. Now, don't get me wrong, these are not your Samsung tablets. These are tablets that's flat and shiny, and thereby we call them mirrors, right? It's for reflection purposes. And then the kind of material they wear, they have a linen wrapper, turbans, and in this case, turbans would be headgear, and then robes. This would be also another form of wrapper, something which is bigger, more like maybe a large veil to wrap around the shoulder. Okay. Now, I just want to point out to you that before I just go down the next verses, I hope you can see that these are descriptions of the women of the day, likely to be the upper class, the rich, the powerful women. We read earlier that the women are ruling the men, and this would go along with the fact that the Hamas would be the social injustice where the rich, the leaders, the princes, the upper class would oppress the lower class, weaker people. And from verse 18, as we are reading and including the earlier verses, describes the nature of the women folk. And hence you can find that these women folk are the ones that are fairly loud, fairly, well, I guess you can say show off. They have the material wealth to do that. Now in verse 24 comes the contrast. And so shall it be. Well, instead of the sweet smell, instead of a sweet smell, there will be a rotten smell. And you see, the punishment would be to take away what seems to be good that they found, and then they are turned into something quite the opposite. Instead of a sash to wear around the waist like a girdle, the sash becomes a rope to hang themselves. Instead of a well-set hair that they do up themselves with hair setting, these are what we call artistic hairdo, there is no hair. Instead of a rich robe, they are wearing sackcloth. Now, sackcloth is a reflection of humility, of repentance. And so rich robe would demonstrate the pumpness, right? The pompousness. Sackcloth would be turning them into something very humble. And the last part of verse 24, the word branding. How should we look at the word branding? The word branding would be something that is very clear, something very clear to be part of a humble sign, okay? Branding instead of beauty. So whatever people can see, it's no longer beauty, it is a humility. But more important now, as we get into verse 25, The way of humility is not just the lack of a beauty, which is here. If you pay attention to verse 25, you would see these sad words. Your men shall fall by the sword. And then verse 25, those with strength, those of might will fall in the war. And this would be the impending war with the Babylonians. Now, what does this mean is this? Why is the young men falling seen to be a contrast to the beauty and the pompness of the women? The reason being is this: in the ancient days, having pomp and showing off their beauty is really very much to attract the men so that they can be married. And when we say that your men shall fall by the sword and your mighty in the war, it means that the young men will be fewer, they will die. And her gates shall lament and mourn. And these are the same A and B. It's about mourning, about crying of what they have lost. Her gates would be the front of the cities. And the result would be she would be desolate as she sits on the ground. And this gives us a picture that the war is lost. The war is lost. The cities lie desolate. And the men have died. Now we move on to verse 1 of chapter 4, which is actually the continuation of the previous verse. And in that day of the judgment, which we have read, when the men have died, so what is this? 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own food and wear our own apparel. Only let us be called by your name to take away our reproach. These are forms of marriages. And this is a nominal marriage where they are not taken care of by the men. The only thing that they take on is the name, so that they are not seen as, well, I guess in the ancient days, when one is not married, it's seen to be a reproach, a shame. Now, there's a second aspect as well. If they are barren, it is no longer shame. It is actually death. All right. So the reproach here is about not getting married. It is not about not having children. And so when I say that it's nominal marriages, it means this: they are not looking toward the men to take care of the women. That's a major difference in the regular way of marriage. In the ancient marriages, the man takes care of the women. And the expression here in chapter 4, verse 1, you would find that they are no longer asking for that. They just want to be married so that they are not ashamed, because there are no longer enough men around. Now, getting into verse 2. In verse 2, in that day, and again, it is with reference to the end of that judgment. It's a judgment period. And it says here, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious. Now, I think one of the things that we need to appreciate is the branch here is the sprout. If you look at a fig tree, the branch would be the part where life comes out. And as life comes out after the judgment, when everything is over, it paints another picture that the branch of the Lord will be beautiful, it will be glorious. The fruit of the earth shall be excellent and appealing. Previously, it's all dead, right? There's nothing to eat, not enough. But this entire picture is only for one class of people. And the class of people are those from Israel who have escaped. What do you mean by escape? The ones who have tried to run away, right? That's the word escape. And then when they come back to Jerusalem, what would happen? And it shall come to pass that he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Now, this is important because we need to understand the word holy means that he is different. He is special. And these would be the ones who are the righteous. They are the ones who are faithful to God. And everyone who is recorded among the living in Jerusalem, and there won't be many people there left. After the series of judgments that has come, where the beautiful becomes the smelly, as we had read in chapter 3, then it symbolizes with the punishment and with the judgment that God has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. The filth here literally means, how should we say, excrement, right? It is something really smelly. And this was displayed by the daughters of Zion. And then God says he would purge. And the word purge here is rinse. Rinse or, right? Rinse or cleanse away. These are pictures of cleaning, right? The blood of Jerusalem from her midst. Because after the war, there will be a lot of blood. And by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. So burning and judgments are both in the same category of emphasis. Then the Lord will create above every dwelling place of Mount Zion, above her congregations, a cloud and smoke by day, the shining of flaming fire by night. I'm sure you will remember that these are pictures of how life was in the wilderness, that there was a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And this represents the presence of God in Mount Zion as what he would call a dwelling place. For over all the glory, there will be a covering. Now, I need to spend some time here to explain the idea of a covering. The word covering here is huppah. Huppah is, how should we call it? It's like a canopy. And so it gives us the picture of a tabernacle, a tent, a sukkah. That would be a similar word. So this is a huppah. And there will be a sukkah. So this is a, let me just put it down in another color. This would be a huppah. And this would be a sukkah, which is what we call a tabernacle for shade in the daytime from the heat, a place of refuge for shelter from storm and rain. And this would be an A and a B. Why? Because a chuppah and a sukkah, They are both for covering, for shade. And so chuppah would be a canopy, sukkah would be a tent, which does quite the same. So now we have an A and B, which actually has the same emphasis, and the emphasis is a covering. God is going to provide a covering, a shelter in the daytime as well as in the night for refuge. And the idea of refuge here would be a place where it is a shelter and a shelter here. So we have a A and a B. The second word for shelter would be a mistor, would be a covert. It is a hiding place. And so we have the refuge and the shelter from storm and rain. Storm would be really pouring down, and rain would be very much the rain that we know. So these are the shelter from what's coming down from above. And so now we have a picture, don't we? This picture of verse 3 says that at the end of the day, where the remnant is left, and they are the ones who's different, they are the faithful ones, they will be the ones who is alive, and thereby in Jerusalem itself, God will wash and clean the place. And it will always be in Mount Zion. It would be a place where they would congregate, and the presence of God will be very real once again.